which we live in and I have to live in. We stand in solidarity with people worldwide fighting for equality, social justice, green initiatives, anti-fascism, police and prison abolition, and anti-imperialism and land-back struggles.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not good at talking for
Good, thank
people.
you.
So, yeah, we're available to help out with anything. You can go to our website if you want to shit post us or something. Radicalcamping.org.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Bernard, for reminding us too that all of this work is intersectional with different work that's happening in the community, including police abolition, prison abolition, and many other movements, and that's why a lot of people are here from. So thank you again. If are you next? You want to speak? Come on up.
Hi, sort of last minute, so please forgive if this presents as anything of a ramble. My name is Aoife, as you just heard. I was inspired not to play chicken by Morgan and share some of the stuff on my mind. So, in the course of my life, I spent several cumulative years houseless in a variety of circumstances, mostly in my childhood. So this ranged from sleeping in the car, being at a variety of domestic violence shelters, seeking refuge with my mother and sister from my stepdad, stayed for a short time with a primarily indigenous community camping out on Oahu. Have, like Morgan, I'm very well traveled, and most of the places that I have visited, I was houseless when I was there. And all of those experiences, especially those experiences paired with the education that I have now and adequate time to process them has grown a lot. So one thing that I observed throughout all of those years is that the manufactured scarcity, especially when this manifested within the confines of an institution, produced necessarily a guardedness and a sort of self-interested, self-serving attitude in many people. Because these were people who had so very little, and what little meager scraps were handed down to them, they were placed in a position where they had no choice from a perspective of self-preservation but to vie for dominance over the scraps that were tossed to them. And so naturally this also intensified pre-existing social dynamics of dominance and oppression. And while it wasn't absent outside of these institutions, in that community that I stayed with for a short time on Oahu, for example, there was an actual sense of, much like we are witnessing and experiencing here, of actual community, camaraderie, solidarity, people simply living together without some sort of force presiding over them that they had to appease and appeal to in order to receive basic dignity and to have their very basic needs lowest down on Maslow's hierarchy met. Out there, when people came together with whatever they had, it was as entirely sovereign beings. And because of that, there was at the very least a level of respect, mutual respect and equality that they could afford to one another in their interactions. So, being with my mother and my sister, being a white family, we definitely received a lot more support than many other folks in our position would have. And we were insulated from a lot because of that as well. But it doesn't mean that I didn't still come to learn the gritty reality of the violence of deprivation. So I mentioned that stayed at a lot of domestic violence shelters. And those were the best shelters that I stayed in. They were often repurposed houses, and very contrary, and in stark contrast to a lot of the other institutions that I stayed in. They actually felt, to some degree, welcoming. Like, there was some sense of homeliness to them. Not the cold, harsh sterility of these places that would dominate your time, expect you to be in and out, and have no real regard for the, I suppose you could call them the higher spheres of human experience. But I'm not done. Sorry. Again, I apologize for presenting as a ramble.
Doing great.
So, there's nothing inherently wrong about a mansion-sized building. The issue is mismanagement of resources. Even a standard nuclear family should not have that. Such enormous architecture entirely to themselves. It is incredibly wasteful. And the vast majority of these people, this reality right outside their doors that they look upon with disdain. There's this threshold, this psychological threshold that they are utterly unwilling to step over in order to actually, on a deep emotional level, understand that. The vast majority of them have been insulated from it their entire lives. And those who have not, those who have that extraordinarily rare rags to riches tale that has kept generations of folks miserably intoxicated with the so-called American dream. Because of that manufactured scarcity, which produced that aforementioned guardedness and disconnection, there is the operative word, disconnection from their fellow human beings. When they finally ascend to that position of prominence and opulence, it is something that they strived toward the entire time, with that profound sense of disconnection. And so it is a Herculean task then to ask of them to just see other human beings and circumstances aside from theirs, because they have carried that disconnection all along and they've got theirs, and they know what it is like to not have theirs. Carl Jung had some problematic views and terminology. One thing, however, one concept that he gifted to this world is, how many of you are familiar with Carl Jung's concept of the shadow? Not many. So the shadow is, you have tapestry that is black and white. It is inextricably interwoven. So the white portions of the tapestry exist in inextricable relationship with the black portions of the tapestry, in the same way that the stars exist inextricably in relationship with the void. The shadow is that side of ourselves which we repress. It's not something that is entirely negative, but there are certainly many qualities embedded in our shadow that we would describe as being negative and certainly very destructive. But that destructive capacity mostly comes from our refusal to acknowledge, accept, and integrate it. This does tie into everything that I have been discussing, so please just bear with me. There are also positive qualities contained in the shadow, things which through our conditioning we have been taught, largely unconsciously, to seal away, because we learned through that conditioning that it was dangerous to allow those qualities within ourselves to unabashedly manifest. On a microcosm, an unintegrated shadow can cause a lot of harm in our relationships, can lead us to be a wrecking ball in our own lives. And we will engage in a variety of escapist habits to avoid really looking at that part of us. And those escapist habits can be extraordinarily sophisticated. In fact, that escapism is not something that we are generally consciously aware of. It can even manifest as us being harmful, even physically harmful to those around us. Anything external that reminds us of that within ourselves that we have not been able to accept and integrate. On a macrocosm, on a societal scale, because I'm always seeking to do that, to find the relationship between the micro and the macro, on a macro scale. So what I was discussing with them, the people living here, part of the Laurelhurst Neighborhood Association, who have so much contempt for their unhoused neighbors, unwilling to step past that threshold, is because it is a disruption to the carefully crafted image that they have of themselves, to the luxuries which, in most cases, they received without any effort on their part. But in any case, it is a disruption to that. It necessarily, and in many cases they're not consciously aware of this, but it necessarily forces them. It is a mirror. Because this can only exist in relationship to the violence of deprivation that many of you here either have or currently are being subjected to. And they don't want to look at that. They do not want to confront that. And I get it. I have been doing a lot of work recently to see and acknowledge things in myself that I'm not proud of, that have caused harm in my relationships and my capacity to live in right relationship with the world. Yeah, it's hard and it's scary. I get it. But the alternative is to continue living unconsciously, toxically, causing damage to everything around you. And the more that you have, the greater your capacity to perpetuate and perpetrate that harm. Dragging us right along to the oblivion of the total destruction of the biosphere. And the way that they slice up, segment reality in 10,000 different ways renders them in many cases simply unable to step back and look at things from that overarching perspective. From the perspective that would reveal to them that their active contempt for those around them suffering through the violence of deprivation is, in fact, hastening our trajectory toward climatological catastrophe. How do you think we got here in the first place? Profound disconnection and an absolute unwillingness to be aware. Everyone gathered here today, all of you, From the bottom of my heart, I thank you. You give so freely of yourselves. And whatever challenges each of you has undergone individually, you haven't allowed that to harden your hearts, to become disconnected from one another. And that requires extraordinary strength. Once more, I apologize for this presenting as a ramble, but I do very much thank you for your patience in sitting through it with me. I love you. I love all of you. Thank you.
We love you.